Hey, Jules here again, and this time we're going to talk about a ProLite snare drum. This is a 14 by 6 brass snare drum with the Hella die-cast hoops. Now, for those who don't know, Hella is a German manufacturer of automotive parts, and they have made these exceptionally beefy hoops for Sonor for decades. And they're the favorites of a lot of folks, myself included. And when you compare them to standard or more generic looking die cast tubes, you can see there's a lot more beef, a lot more weight and mass, and it has a big impact on rim shots and flams and cross sticking and all that good stuff. And I've just always been an advocate for the heavier die cast tubes. They just really work for me. Some people like the more generic ones, and some people like triple flange or whatever. You know, everybody's got their preferences, but for me, that's where it's at in a snare drum. Now, the ProLite series has been phased out, and there are very few new models available out there in stock. I know where some are, so for some reason during this video, if you're tempted to buy one, send me a message or whatever, and I can put you on to who last had some that I knew of. And I've had two of them, and I'll come back to why that is significant here later. But a quick background. Immediately prior to switching back to Sonor, I had 19 Gretsch snare drums and loved every one of them with the exception of a couple. A couple of lower end ones I just couldn't do much with, but all the other stuff from the cheaper lines on up, all was phenomenal sounding drums. Now, uh, I was in a position at that time to experiment and try all this. And by the time I made the switch back to Sonor, the finances had changed a little. But more, as importantly, if not more, I found one particular snare drum that I didn't need another one. And that's a pretty profound thing for a guy like me that looks for excuses to buy stuff. And that was this ProLite snare drum. And I was gigging with the Mac George band, and we were primarily older country, some newer country, a little bit of rock. Um, but this snare drum really worked great, and it's one of those that uh, if you really lay in with some heavy flams, you know, rim shots, man, it's going to open up and go, and it'll handle more subtle playing, nice cross sticking, nice solid sounding cross sticking stuff. And the drum was just a great balance all the way around, and whatever I wanted to do, this drum would do very nicely. And the reason I ever let it go was because I was getting ready to move up north to a drum shop up there. And a friend of mine, Ron Wixow, he's been with the Steve Miller Band since 2021. They were looking to replace the Steve Miller Band touring rig, touring drum rig. And so Ron got in touch with me for some ideas, and I suggested some heavy birch SQ2s, and after watching some videos, he concurred on that. And then he asked for my opinion on snare drums. Well, at the time, Sonor was already phasing out the ProLite snare drums. The shell sets were already gone, uh, but the snare drums they were still trickling in, trickling them in, here and there. But at that particular time, the place I was going to work for didn't have any, and so I volunteered to sacrifice mine so that they could, the it'd go with the rig going out to the Steve Miller Band. So I did. Now, what makes this significant to me is that when the Steve Miller Band's touring techs got a hold of the new SQ2 sets, they took off all the stock tom heads, or all the stock heads altogether, I guess, except the Rezo bass drum head. And they installed May mounting systems. The floor toms and kick drum all got the May monorails. The tom tom got a May tom mounting system, and all new heads across the board. All batters, all Rezos on toms. The batter on the kick drum. And yet, when I went to go see them on the second or third date, this new drum rig was in service. They still had my snare heads on that snare drum. Now, what a testament to not only the drum itself, but my particular choice of drum heads. And I don't know what they had done different on the tuning. I'm sure they had retuned it. But they, actions speak louder than words. So without even having to ask what they thought of the snare drum or the head configuration or whatever, I mean, the proof's in the pudding, right? So the fact they had done all this work on the drum set and left the snare drum like it was, other than tuning, really said a lot to me. And so moving forward a little bit, um, I wound up with a new Sonor set, which I've done a review on. And in that set, I had a compressor, uh, 14 by 6.5 brass. And it was a nice utilitarian snare drum. Sounded good, had 2.3 millimeter hoops. Uh, they're tried and true throw off that's been the standard for quite a while prior to the dual glide system. And so anyway, eventually I decided to upgrade. So I went to something other than Sonor for a little while. And part of what brought me back to Sonor was I could not get a snare sound I liked. I had a Starphonic by Tama, and I am a gearhead. And this is a gearhead's dream come true. This thing's got a system where you just loosen it up a little bit and twist the hooks on the ends of the tension rods and the hoops come off. And there were cool things about the throw off and the butt. And all in all, this drum should have killed it for me. But for some reason, it just flat didn't. It just came up short. It did not have the sound I was looking for. And the hoops, even though they look like die cast hoops, they're not. They're actually probably 1.7 millimeter hoops. They just don't have the ears for the holes, for the tension rods. And I thought, okay, maybe it's an issue with, my ears just really love die cast hoops, and this doesn't have them. So then I bought this harlequin colored thing, and anyway, it was a wood shell. I don't tend to go for wood shells necessarily, although I did have some Gretsch wood shells I really did like. But the drum, even with the die cast hoops, still did not do it. And I'm like, there's no law saying I've got to have a Tama snare drum. So I bought a Black Beauty and got die cast hoops for it. And I'm like, there is no way this won't work. I mean, this is a Ludwig Black Beauty. How could this not be just right? Well, guess what? It was not just right. There was something lacking. I can't exactly put my finger on what it was, but the ProLite had an openness and a response and some brightness to it that I just had to have back. It set the bar so high that I just couldn't stand anything less. And my friend Tim, all along before I started buying these, going through these different snare drums, he's like, man, just get the Sonor again. And at the moment, I had done the Sonor thing to death for years, and I'm like, I'm gonna find something else that'll work. I'm just, you know, I don't hate Sonor. How could you? But just wanted to find something else that worked besides that. And so finally, after a few false starts, I'm like, I don't like spending money to replace high dollar items, but I'm not going to be happy until I get another ProLite. And so I did. And that put the smile back on my face. And so that's back to what I'm playing again. The sadness is that that line has been retired. And so the German lines of snare drums just don't have metal shell snare drums available right now. An exception being Benny Greb, I think it is, and maybe something else. But the compressor series is a nice utilitarian line of snare drums, but they come with the 3 millimeter, or excuse me, 2.3 millimeter hoops, and not the die cast hoops, and certainly not the Hella hoops. And they've also got the standard throw with the fixed butt. which is certainly not on par with the dual glide system. The dual glide system uses a very solid on-off operation. Plus, you've got a sensitivity adjustment on each side, the butt and the throw, and that gives you an opportunity to line your snares up perfectly. You know how it is when you're trying to get your snares on there, and if you've got to pull too far to one side, it just doesn't quite respond right. And you can eliminate some buzz by getting things just centered and all that just right. So, the current utilitarian line of snare drums eliminated all that, but they're at a very affordable price point that opens up the door to that, for that line to a lot of people. So I get that. I have to hope and assume that new upper end snare drums are going to come out this year too. Used to be the Artist Series snare drums had several metal shell drums that were also welded shell, even though they had the machine to do the seamless. A quick sidebar on that is that anytime I've inquired about why they quit making seamless shell metal shell snare drums, the argument was all, or the answer was always, well, we couldn't get that material anymore. Well, you've been making other metal shell snare drums out of brass and steel that wasn't ferromanganese steel. So you're still making metal shell products that could be seamless, but apparently during some transitions, interest was lost in the labor and all that it took to make a seamless shell snare drum. But the other side of the argument to that is that my ProLite kills it. It's welded shell. Um, and the Black Beauty is a seamless shell, and to me, the ProLite is still more open and and brilliant sounding than the seamless Black Beauty. So, we can argue different points all day long about what they could do, or what they should do, or why they don't do it. But the bottom line is this is a fantastic snare drum, so much so that I had to replace my first one with it. So I really hope that something comes out in 2025 that's going to replace the metal shell snare drums lost in the ProLite series with at least something on par with what they were, if not somewhat improved, if there's a way to improve on that. So I will be looking forward to this year to seeing what happens with that. And I like to try to stay current with my gear. I currently have SQ1 drums and vintage series drums and 600 series hardware and a little bit of 4000 stuff. Uh, so I'm anxious to see what they do with the upper end snare drum lines. Hopefully they haven't gone the way of the dinosaur. Because for a guy like me that's a gearhead and that likes the benefit of the dual glide system and the adjustable butt end and the die cast heavy hoops and all that good stuff, um, that's going to leave a gaping hole in the product line, and I really just don't see that happening. So we're going to stay tuned and see how this all pans out. And I appreciate you watching. And I know this was a lot of chatter about stuff not specific to that particular drum, but I hope it's been of some sort of interest to you. And hopefully by the time the year ends, I will have had an opportunity to do some product reviews and with some live playing and all that with some new drums. So we'll just see how that pans out.